All right, this is Tuesday, June 16th, 2026 at 2:48 p.m. This is a meeting with Webster County Board of Supervisors and the Webster County Conservation Board. The purpose of this meeting or workshop, rather, is to discuss the recent department salary adjustment proposal, compensation considerations, and alignment of department salaries with current market conditions. We'll just kind of work down the agenda here with opening and introductions. If you want to, Casey, take it away.
So as Nathan said, my name's Casey Coleman, and I'm a member of the County Conservation Board. We also have Jerry Winge here and Jerry Beck as well, members of the board. Unfortunately, Nick Carlson was not able to attend, nor Beth Collins, but that rounds out the rest of our board. And appreciate all of you taking the time for this ad hoc meeting workshop, just to get a little bit of feedback based upon the most recent vote regarding our salary proposal, just wanting to better understand how things shook out initially with that vote, and talk to you a little bit, as Darren astutely pointed out, this is more of a desire to have a workshop and an ongoing conversation and open discussion as to what we can do to more accurately provide you with data and information that you need in order to make the best possible decisions you can for the county. So really appreciate everyone's willingness to do this ad hoc meeting on short notice on a random afternoon here. So that being said, I think it's really pertinent that this comes across clearly that this is meant to be positive. In no way is anything that I say as we start to walk through here, some of our data points meant to be negative towards the board's decision. We greatly appreciate the support that you've given us over the course of the last few years. I think when you look at county departments as a whole, our county conservation department has had some incredible investments made into our community over the last 5 years and largely 10, but really more acutely the last 5 years has been incredible. When you look at some of the data, we essentially have brought $22 million into our community for spend on quality of life projects, such as the trail expansion, the Rivers Edge Discovery Center, OHV Park Campground, Camp Winoki, and all the associated camping with those locations. So first and foremost, just want to thank you all for your continued support there, because it doesn't go unnoticed by our community. And as members of our community, we greatly appreciate it. We were a bit surprised by the vote based upon the information that we had provided. And I hope you all had an opportunity to review the spreadsheet. And I hope it was clear. If it wasn't, we're happy to answer any questions today about how we really compare with other counties across Iowa. So if you have that spreadsheet, I would direct you to take a quick glance at that. And as you scroll through the various positions, you will see that based upon county size, population, we should be around 33rd in salary, or we're currently at 33rd. We should be around 18. Forgive me for misspeaking there.
So on two different spots in your paperwork, you have that he's at 33rd for salary. You also have that he's at 31st.
Right. So
I checked ISAC, they had him at 31st.
Okay, fair enough. And if you want, let's go with 31st. Okay. Just for clarification purposes. That's great. Still not 18th. And based upon size, should be. Also, when you look at Matt's tenure with the county, we're at 29 years. That's a pretty significant investment of time and dedication to our county. And I don't think anybody here would say that Matt isn't anything more than a extremely desirable community, upstanding member of our community. I don't think anyone here wants to argue that today, because I think there's no point in that. And that's not really what we're trying to achieve here. What we are trying to achieve is the ongoing retention of our county employees and ensuring that we are competitive as it relates to those counties in our immediate surrounding area. Just in the last year, we have had a county employee approached by a neighboring county that is smaller than us, and he was offered a position that paid more. He fortunately, for our sake, turned that down to stay within the community because he believed in the projects that we're doing here and the leadership that we have. And that brought real value for him in addition to just the dollar figures. I think that's an anomaly. I don't think that's something that many people in today's day and age can afford to do, to say, I'm going to take less money to stay with the people that I like working with. And so really what our proposal here is to try to get us as close to market as we can. We're not requesting, if you look at the proposed pricing for each of the positions, we aren't saying that we have to get to 18th. We're just trying to get a little bit closer so that as we do these year over year cost of living increases 2 to 3%, we're more in line and more competitive. We're not saying we have to lead the charge. We just want to be closer to what the market is actually showing right now. Absolutely. So it's just shy of, so if we were going to go with 18th, to be 18th, he would need to be at 35,395. What we proposed was just 95 even. It's pretty darn close. It's, yeah. Right. And to be clear, though, we're not just looking at Matt. As you'll see, there's other positions outlined here. So apologies if that's not clear in the statement I made there. So we're looking at our operations supervisor, our park rangers, naturalist. All of them have subsequent bumps that we're proposing to try to get as close as we can to market level. And I think everybody here would agree that we should be competitive, or we want to be competitive. Now, want to be, yes. And obviously we understand that managing county resources is a challenge in and of itself. Something to note with that, though, is I would highlight the fact that our conservation department over the course of the last 5 years has not only been operating well within our budget, but we've actually doubled our revenue based upon those additions that I mentioned previously with the OHV park, the tiny homes, the associated camping and rentals. We've doubled our revenue. And in addition to that, our department staff have brought in more than $6 million in federal and state grant dollars that cost the county nothing. We're looking at a delta here when you look at the proposal of $29,000 from the subtracting out the 3% that you already approved. There's basically a $29,000 delta there that we're asking the supervisors to consider in order to lift us up, excuse me, and be more competitive. Jerry, or either of you anything? Sorry. Catch my breath.
If you're able to come up to the mic and just state your name again, please.
Jerry Wingy. The gal, Tasha, who's manager of the OHV park, is nationwide known. She gets invited to go do workshops and speaks, but she always comes back home. And she worked really hard out there until we could get another person to work with her. So that just speaks volumes because our OHV park is known nationwide, and you can see the reviews on it from other states all the way around. The other thing too that I think is so important to remember is our trails. Over the course of the years, I've talked to multiple professional people that have came to Fort Dodge, and the deciding factor was you have great trails for bikes. We can get on our bikes and go on a trail anywhere. That's why we chose this. And that's all because our staff just work on keeping them up to date and keeping them groomed.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate you filling in there while my voice gave out. So in addition, one note I'd like to add about Tasha and the team out at the OHV park as well is both of those positions are completely funded by grant dollars. So the County Conservation Department has 12 full-time employees. Those two are completely funded by grant money. So just wanted to clarify that as well.
This is Darren Driscoll, County Attorney. I just want to interject a little. I don't think anybody in this room or anybody who knows much about what conservation's been doing, especially in the last 5 to 10 years and before, would say Matt Cosgrove's done anything less than an amazing job. I mean, he's kind of a role model, I think, in that position for other people around the state because he's been able to get things done. He dreamed for decades of rebuilding this facility, and it finally was able to come to fruition. Done a great job obtaining grant dollars. I don't think anybody's going to challenge you on that. So I think we're all sold that Matt's fantastic. His staff, his organization, the projects have been very beneficial to the community, and also a lot of them were funded with grants, which is great. I think part of the issue in terms of understanding it as to why maybe they weren't looking to bridge that gap at the time it was requested. Timing is a big thing for county governments. I mean, we do usually at the end of December or so, we submit for the following July 1, what we want for salaries, expenses, et cetera, budgets. And then sometime early in the following year, we have budget meetings and we discuss it, and the county tries to figure out, okay, what are our needs? What should the levy rate be for taxes so we can maximize our benefits and still operate without causing too much of a tax burden on the county. I think in this scenario, you make some very valid points. I've made that pretty much the same presentation you've given. How am I going to retain, 5 attorneys in my office when we're being paid at whatever, 28th or 30th or whatever. And so I've done some other things personally that made some adjustments and helped assuage that issue by contracting with other counties and such to at least get the numbers up. But I certainly agree with that. I think it was 17th when I started in population. We've fallen, I think, to 18th. And I think everybody's goal, and we used to have a compensation commission for elected officials, at least try to get those folks as close to that number as we could. Then on the other side, the supervisors have a job to do, and they're responsible to their constituents for keeping it down. I think at this point, budgets were set a while ago. The levy rate was set a while ago. So this is really, I think, more of a discussion, at least from how I understand things, for next budget season to talk about these sorts of things, unless I'm mistaken about that. We've already set allocated dollars. And I could let some of the other supervisors, because I'm just county attorney and I don't know all the timeline on this, but that's part of my understanding of the issue is this is a discussion that should be had at budget time.
And if I may answer that directly before we go around the table, if that's all right. I believe we did submit this proposal earlier, both to the budget director and HR. We received some input from our budget director, did not receive anything from HR as far as input goes around this. And so from a timeliness standpoint, we try to adhere to that and understand the implications of not having a long runway to make those decisions before we move into a new fiscal year. And part of our proposal was actually to fund that $29,000 delta ourselves for year one in anticipation that the supervisors could support us in subsequent years thereafter. So just adding that additional detail, if that didn't come through clearly in our initial proposal, that was what we were suggesting. But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us on a tangent. I just wanted
Real quick, I want to apologize I had it all planned out to get here and I got tied up
No worries.
trying to get here. So I apologize. I was running a little behind and had to go virtual there for a minute, but no, so I appreciate you guys setting this up and having this conversation, and I will say that's, I did understand that my understanding was that that's how that was going to work out, is that it would be funded through the word am I looking for?
Trust fund.
Trust fund. There we go. So I did understand that. And I think there's a lot of things to try to reconcile and understand when we do that, 100%. We always, and we've said this to other department heads at the same time that, we absolutely want you guys advocating for your people. So that's ultimately why you do these kinds of things, is how we keep and retain talent. One of the conversations, as Darren said, that, we've gone through the budget cycle. We had everything set there. So it makes it a little harder to come in and try to add it. So maybe there's other conversations that should have been had beforehand. Just looking to the future then. So that becomes part of the issue. And the other issue that we end up having and where government is a little bit different is, we don't have, when prices change, we get fixed. And, we don't have, hey, we can charge more for certain things and do, we get very fixed on the things that we can do. And then like the last couple of years of legislative sessions have shown that what they end up doing is they cap how much we can collect in tax money. And then at the same time, don't tell us what we can cut out of the things that we have to do. I think as a whole, to your point and to Darren's point, I mean, Matt's done a fantastic job. There's no question about that. I've known him for a while. My babysitter growing up used to work for him, or her husband did. So, I mean, I've known of him for a long time, and he does a phenomenal job. And, so when I look at, how do we get everybody there? I mean, we've got, unfortunately, a lot of people that are kind of in the same boat. So then the question comes, how do we kind of start chipping away at getting closer to market? That gets a little challenging with government. As we saw this last legislative session, they put in a 2% gap. So as much as I'd love to say I'll get everybody to 18, that is very highly unlikely to happen. Just, what ends up happening is we can raise it up there, but then we have to make cuts somewhere else in order to meet our budget demands. And House File 718, 2 or 3 years ago, whatever that was, started the trend to this way. And it's made it harder and harder because, as you've seen, the cost of goods, the cost to build stuff, the cost of material, none of that is getting any cheaper. I mean, the cost of building a road that hasn't gone down anywhere. And so the cost to the counties continues to go up as the state legislators are telling us we need to cut more down, but they're not taking anything out of our plate of things that we have to do. So when we come into these, and something we have looked at a little bit, or at least I've talked about with a few folks, is doing more like the salary surveys. I know there's other counties that have done that. The caveat is it gets really hard. I mean, Crystal can help it, it gets hard because we get very fixed in what we can spend and where we can spend it at and what we can do and what revenue growth we're allowed. And, so it does get very hard. So anyway, I gave a really long-winded answer there. But no, I mean, it's, I'm proud of all the work that you guys have done on your board. I'm proud of the work that Matt and his team have done. It's phenomenal. It's how do we figure out how to marginally move the needle? It's kind of how I look at it, because unlike private sector business, we don't have the flexibility to say, well, the cost of our inputs went up, so therefore I'm going to go raise the cost of this. It's the challenge. You guys get it, I think. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir out of it. So I'm not trying to insult you or anything.
Not at all.
So yeah, anyway, that's my 2 cents out of that. But, I'm glad you guys, set this up to have the conversation. So
Appreciate that. And I would just say as a counterpoint to some of the arguments you made there, which were all very valid, the conservation department is a revenue generating department. As I mentioned with the grant dollars and elsewhere, those investments we've made have improved our revenue year over year. And so we're simply asking to invest in those areas that are helping to drive revenue for the county. And that was our thought process with this investment. Additionally, you mentioned you would love to get everybody up to 18th, and I understand that you can't do that all at once. We're simply asking that we try to fall in line that the precedent that was already established with the increases that we've seen over the course of the last several years, whether that be with our county assessor. As Darren mentioned, he had similar conversations in the past on the county attorney side of the house. Luke Fleener on the sheriff's side of the house. I mean, we've seen those significant step increases to try to get us more competitive. And that's really all we're asking for, is the same level of consideration for our department. So.
Yeah, and there's maybe a little caveats in there. So like the assessor is a conference board. So we're 1/3 of that vote. So we don't fix that. And, and as long as the one went last year, there were dissenting votes out of that as well. And so the precedent is not entirely on the board in that case because she's governed by the conference board. So kind of when I hear that, it makes it a little difficult because we're only 1/3 of the vote. Sure. And then as far as like the sheriff, we got after that, the Back to Blue bill, yep, where the governor said thou shalt go do these certain things, and we get our hands tied a little bit.
And a quick point on that, Matt does currently manage law enforcement individuals.
Yeah.
Through county conservation. So it comes to back and they are responsible. And so I think he's made a great point. I agree with that.
Just in terms of what the Back to Blue required, though, was specifically elected county sheriff. And I do appreciate it. I know I've looked over those agreements for conservation officers to act in law enforcement capacity, but they didn't mandate all law enforcement officers to make X percentage of what a police chief in a similarly situated demographic. That's what they did with the sheriff's salary. So
It
Took himself to,
having been former law enforcement too, I understand.
You get it. Yep.
Yeah.
the sheriff just went to 38th. He was at 41st to 38 based on county salary. So that's a lot different. Now, I did have some questions about your spreadsheet.
Sure.
So I wanted to know how I was supposed to interpret the park tax. Were they a clerk, another position? Were they park rangers? Because you're telling me they're 18th, but I can't tell how many of these positions even exist in the state. Do you know what I'm referencing here at all?
I'm not, and I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the initial part of your
Okay,
conversation.
so I want to know what the park techs are here.
Tax, okay, sorry. I thought you said part tax and I wasn't tracking with you there.
Are they maintenance techs?
Yep, so it's a combination thereof.
Sure.
So that's a fair clarification. We kind of grouped them together because we got trail technicians, park maintenance, et cetera.
I had a couple other here. So your guys' salary growth over the last 5 years, which was when I understand you guys last did one of these, was third highest in the county. So how much of that would we have actually funded and how much of that would have come out of grants? Do you
So
know?
two of the positions
Mhm.
at the OHV park are fully funded by grant.
Correct, and but they existed before and sorry, just keep going.
Well, one of them didn't exist before. just for
Uh,
clarification. We only
have-
ever had one person employed at the OHV park, and then we did have a temporary seasonal help for summertime that was ad hoc based upon our department budgets where we could afford to employ that person for a set amount of hours. But
Would that have been reflected in your salaried employees or your hourly employees?
so for the net new positions or for the historical, I just want to make sure I'm addressing your question.
I mean, I've got the same number of positions in 2022, except for one position out at the Cosgrove Center. All of those are salaried. You have the exact same number of salaried positions, and I'm pretty sure they're all the same names now in 2027.
Previously with the OHV park, we only had one full-time employee out there. As of a year, maybe 18 months ago, we got approval to add a second FTE out there via those grant dollars, and that's where that second position came out there, so. The other 10 are absolutely, county funded, department funded, it's just those two that are grant.
So a large part of that then is an added position that was grant funded.
The added position was.
Okay, that's, how many of them are partially grant funded? Do you know?
It's a good question. I don't know that. How many are partially funded through grant dollars? Well, the OHV, the two are total, but then he's talking about the additional 10. I mean, really, I don't think they really are. I mean, there's facets of their role that are funded via grant dollars and resources that they utilize. But as far as true salary funding, I don't believe any of the additional 10. I'm happy to go back though and get clarification on that for you. But I don't believe that the remaining 10 their salaries are covered by grant dollars. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, gentlemen, city partially funded on the trail project area around here. Do you maintain that? And he was partially funded for that portion of the city trails.
So more of a cost sharing than a true funding.
Okay, that's definitely something I would have liked to have seen before something like this came in front of me, so I could have done the math there. So, and under your proposal, how much of those two fully grant funded positions would the county now be responsible? How much of that salary would the county pick up? Zero. So all of that is just, you are reallocating grant money. And that was, we'll talk later. I don't want to say names out loud on.
Yep, fair enough. Yep.
So one thing, I guess, kind of in addition to that, when I think through budgets, for example, and how I look at things. So the best example I can give is, I'm going to use HR as an example. They are not a revenue generator. So then the question becomes, do the raises then go to revenue generators only? Because and I see this because in my private sector life, I'm not, what I do in the private sector doesn't generate my business money other than the services that I provide. And so when I start looking at holistically at the entire budget and where everybody's at, I have a hard time looking at some of that at times because we do have department heads that do phenomenal work in their role, but aren't generating revenue because that's not what their role does. And so I struggle a little bit, and I get it. I mean, that's, again, I expect you guys to advocate for this. That's why we put you in these positions. It's why we trust you with those. You know, it's, we want people that care about that position and your role in this. But where I look at it holistically is there are departments that don't generate revenue. And so then how do I really get those departments to do the similar type of thing if they aren't a revenue generator and they don't bring, you know, HR to me is about the easiest example I can think of is they don't, that position in and of itself is not, its primary function doesn't generate revenue. So then where I have to consider that is, okay, am I going to say, okay, because he's not generating revenue, I'm not going to try to get him to 18. So that, and I'm more just saying this, like, as my mindset as I think through some of the budgets, because it gets hard to look at it in that fashion, because I see my, you know, my own private sector role in some of these cases is I'm not a revenue generating role. I have other functions but revenue generate, you know, I have no capability to generate revenue in some cases. So if I'm gonna base wage based solely on revenue generation or use it as the major point of it, it makes it a little trickier because then how do I address those that their primary function doesn't generate revenue? Now, ideally, like with HR, the goal would be that they onboard great employees and we keep people around and, you know, go, yes, but functionally they're not generating us anything. And so that's where, it's a point that I fully expect folks to make when that's you know, that's something that you can hang a hat on. I 100% expect to hear that. But for me, looking at it from a supervisor's position is we do have positions that don't generate revenue. And then how do I address that? Because they really, you know, they don't. And so I try to look at it holistically from that perspective. And I'm more just saying this is to help you maybe understand where I'm coming from when I look at it. Just because it does make that conversation tricky because there are people that their primary function, Aaron's probably an example outside of, you know, the agreement with Hamilton County. He's not generating, his primary function doesn't generate revenue for the county. So it makes positions like that harder. Jamie's probably another example, you know. No, I'm not meaning that, but like your function is not revenue, you know, he has no way to sell off lines of our road for money generation, right? So his primary function is to spend to keep our roads current, you know, and so how do I start to weigh that case against everything? Now, it is a fair argument. I mean, I'm not trying to discredit that at all, just kind of giving some insight into my thought process there.
Absolutely. And it's a valid point. I think it was just an added line or bullet point in our argument of making an investment in a revenue generating department helps us to generate more revenue, which helps to cover those departments that don't.
Yeah.
It wasn't that we shouldn't give increases for.
No, I know. Like I said, it's just more of just kind of to help understand kind of where I'm at with some of that. My thought process, because I don't want you to leave here being like, I didn't know what Austin was thinking on something. And
I appreciate that clarification.
For those that might look like they're not generating revenue, because they're not doing the grant work, they are indeed creating revenue. They're keeping the trails open for the skiers that come into our community. And we have a lot of those snowshoer skiers that come in and use our trails. And so those people that aren't generating the revenue per se, they're out there grooming and they're getting it ready. Same way with the kayak rentals and the paddle boats. That might not look like they're making money, but they're charging to get that kayak in the water. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, I don't
And
disagree
the
with that at all.
campground thing,
No,
the
yeah.
people doing the camps, those are all income revenue, but they're not writing grants for that. They're
Yeah, I'm not so much like internal to concert. It's more kind of an insight into my thought process there that, you know, we have other departments that are well below the 18 mark whose primary function doesn't. And I guess, and even in the conservation side, I'm not even speaking just specifically to Matt in that regard. It's a whole department because it's a team effort, right? I mean, we say we in Webster County and I feel like we mean it because I do think we're a pretty good team in here. So I'm more referring to, we have other like departments whose primary purpose doesn't generate any revenue. If that makes sense.
Austin, you weren't here. I'm Jerry Beck. I'm the senior elder, you might say. I've been on the board for 20 years, which is a long, long time, believe me. Dealt with a lot of boards as we come through. You guys have always been very supportive of all of us, everything we're doing out there. Initially, 2 years ago, Matt Cosgrove was approached by the Iowa office for a position. And this got us thinking for our succession. What if we lose him? And what if we lose other people? Like we almost lost one here a year ago. And that's what brought up the fact that we started looking at, all right, what can we do to get these positions in line, comparative, to get good people here to replace. Matt started a succession program out to the park, the people to see, do we have people that can step in if he should happen to go? At that time, knowing Matt, he just said, no, I can't leave, because we had the nature center, we had the trails going, we had a student and a senior at St. Edmunds, enough to keep him here.
Life as a teacher.
But it got us thinking as a board, what happens? What do we do? And so we started looking at all of the different salary surveys, and like we were way down from where we were compared to the state of Iowa. So this is what more or less prompted why we came to you folks with the proposal. And again, we're kind of looking for some guidance because we know sooner or later, Karen Hansen is another person, our naturalist. She's been there for what, 29, 30 years. She's talking about maybe taking it easy. We need to know what we can do. And then we want to fill people that have that quality to keep this program going. But salaries guide it right now, as far as the conservation is concerned. So again, we would like some guidance. We would hope that you would consider our proposals as we come to you. I know in the past you've been real receptive there for a while. We never got a dime of the money we raised. It all went to the county coffers. Finally, the board gave us 50 cents of every dollar. And you'd be amazed what we've been able to do for structure out to the park with that 50 cents. So we have put that money to good use on that point. But again, we're trying to hire quality people when and if that time comes. And right now, salary is dictated.
Thank you. I'll just kind of echo a little bit of the comments made here. I don't want to repeat a lot of the same information and go on, but I appreciate you guys as a board of standing up for the conservation team and vouching for them. Obviously, that's what we'd expect out of a board. So greatly appreciate and respect that. I think all of us deeply respect the work the conservation team does. We appreciate that. Just to echo some of the comments too, with the multi departments we have here in the county. I know we have Jamie Joel right here, our county engineer with the engineering department. I know he's ranked pretty low in 99 counties. And it's hard to get everybody up to that mark. And when you start choosing certain departments over others, it opens up a can of worms internally for the organization on kind of what's the best way to go about it. But we're happy to try to figure out a solution. I don't know exactly what's in the trust fund in terms of dollars that you guys could work with too, alongside our 3% or something long-term that would be sustainable or grow. We're happy to have that conversation with you guys. But just trying to maintain 3% across the board in our eyes is the best way to go about this, besides choosing and picking which department may be better than another. So that's kind of been our thing. And we really tried hard to get 3% this year. I know we've been given 2%, so to go up another percent to try to bring our people up and invest in them as much as we can. We're trying to do as best as we can, given the particular climate situation we're in. So appreciate you guys coming up here.
Say, you're right. I mean, salaries do play a lot into how everything works. So if you want to know, like, holistically, what can you do? Really, it's lobby legislators to say, take out some of these unfunded mandates. So like the last one that I've been looking at is our speed limit change. You know, we changed the speed limit, but the state's not paying for the signs. We, you know, we eat a lot of these that they'll make changes. I think I saw Boone County was going to spend something like $60,000 changing signs. I don't know exactly what ours will be in total, but I know I saw Boone County, I think it was Boone had said something that was going to be like 60,000 to go replace all of their 55-mile-an-hour signs to 60-mile-an-hour signs. And the state's not giving us anything to go do any of that stuff. We have to eat the cost of these things. And those eat into everything else. And where it gets hard, because where I struggle is when you look at some of the other counties, for example. The best example I can use right now is if we look at our next door neighbors, with the fixed costs that we have, they're laying off 5 people out of the Briggs Woods Convention Center because I won't speak to everything that they've done, but they get very fixed on costs. And at some point there has to be a give somewhere. So that's the thing that we're trying to balance, is how do we make sure that we keep and retain good employees, but we don't put ourselves in a spot where we're having to start cutting. I mean, because they're cutting a whole department over there. You know, and I don't want to see us ever, you know, objectively as a county, I don't want to ever see us bring in good talent and then say, sorry, we didn't manage our money very well. And now we're going to lose good talent because we didn't manage money well. And I think collectively as a county, we've done pretty well at that. And my objective is to continue on that path. So, you know, while I don't disagree that, you know, we want to get everybody there ends up being trade-offs. So the biggest thing that anybody can do is talk with legislators, watch what's going on in the state legislature every spring, because a lot of the things that they change impact us in our budgets. And like I said, the last round of legislation that came through, I mean, they capped us, but they didn't take anything off our plates. So while the cost of cement's going up, the cost of services is going up, they're not taking anything off, and they're just saying we can't go anymore without new revenue. So it gets very hard to say, okay, we want to go do all of this stuff. So then kind of how I look at it is we got to come up with a plan to move the needle. Because, you know, anytime you're going from like wherever you're at to try to get to 18 is always a big lift, and it becomes a very expensive lift later. And I'm not saying that he's not worth it. So please don't take it that direction. I mean, he's worth far more than, I think all of our employees are worth far more than what we're paying them right now, because it's, you know, we have such a great team here. But when I look at, you know, we incur costs like that the county is going to have to pay for, and there's nobody here to fix that for us. It's either that or we leave the speed limit at 55. And I don't know that anybody wants that either. You know, those are kind of the holistic things that play into when you look at the budgets. Those are the rest, kind of the other pieces of the puzzle that we have to look at, is there are costs like that people don't see that we end up having to cover because of somebody else's decision at that point. And that just happens to be the most recent one that I can point out there. But, you know, that is one that's going to cost us, and it may not be a lot. I can't remember how much exactly it would be to do that. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're still having to cover what the state wants to go change. So it does make it tricky in some regards. So we're trying to move the needle and keep folks getting raises, you know, managing the cost of living. Because at the end of the day, that's the biggest part of it too, is, you know, and I look at some of the private sector, if they have down years, you're either get a 0% raise. I've heard of people getting pay cuts. Doesn't happen very often. Typically, if you're cutting pay, you're just cutting the position. You know, and we want to make sure we're never looking at having to do any of those things, if that makes sense.
And just one point to clarify too, for those that are joining us via Teams right now that maybe have not seen this spreadsheet too, that proposal, when I say that $29,000 delta, that is not specific to Matt. Matt is at about a 10,000 of that 29. The rest is spread across other department employees, trying to bring them up. So just wanted to clarify for those that maybe, okay, yeah, perfect. Thank you for putting that on there. Appreciate it. Yeah, so in that column J there, column J, row 11, you'll see that those red figures show the delta based upon 18th and salary and where we're trying to go. So as you scroll down through there, it shows the math on each of the positions and what the proposal delta is there highlighted in red. And then as you scroll down all the way to the bottom, that's where that $29,000 delta is totaled up, subtracting out the 3% that was already approved. So I guess going forward, because I realize that we are, coming up on about 45 minutes here and really appreciate the amount of time that you all are willing to put into this. As a board, in addition to some of the comments, John, you made about trying to get these proposals to you sooner, we absolutely can do that. Is there anything else that we can be supplying you with as far as the information goes to help justify some of these increases, or just to help you feel more informed as you go into a vote? And the reason why I asked that question is an education question for myself. It's not trying to put blame on anybody at all. It's more so help me understand so we can do a better job type deal. Watching the meeting that transpired on the vote, I didn't see a lot of discussion around the proposal. I actually didn't see any discussion. Now that may have happened behind closed doors or just sidebar conversations, and that's great. But I just want to make sure that we're actually getting you the tools that you need to make what we feel are appropriate decisions here. Because as a board and a volunteer board, we feel as though we're dedicating a lot of time and energy and effort into bringing strong proposals to you and partnering with you. And if we're not meeting the mark, we want to know how we can be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, getting this put together, because we do budget workshops, typically either very end of the year, or typically in January. If we can get these in here at the budget workshop, we're happy. I mean, I'm happy to discuss it. We can't promise what we're going to do, because the other half of that is what are we going to be allowed to do? Because once we take everybody's budget into account, so what I try to recommend is, I always want to make sure we're hitting cost of living at a minimum. I want to always hit that for all of our people, because I don't think it's fair to employ people and say, sorry, the cost of living is going to go up 2.5%, and I'm going to give you 0, or I'm going to give you 1. I mean, that may happen at some point. Just that's unfortunately the nature of how things work. I'd prefer to never get there. But when we come into the budget workshop, that would be a great time to have all of this. Because then that's where we can have that discussion through that workshop, unless you guys have something else. But, we set all those up, and that's really what that time is dedicated for, is to having these discussions of, here's where we want to go, here's what we want to do. Sometimes, like I said, we can't always do that. We have to take into account everything, but getting those typically in January, whenever when we schedule the budget workshops, Crystal helps with all of that.
Yeah.
I guess. Yes.
Crystal Lloyd, Budget and Finance Director. So I would say each department is given a spreadsheet to fill in where they're at. And I think Matt has approached that with you guys. And I know this year we asked for departments to not make a change with their salaries, just because we were unsure what was going to happen statewide and, figuring all that out. That doesn't mean that the departments can't come and try and justify why they would like to see something different, and we can make note that, it's perfect time to do that. Yes, typically budget hearing or budget workshops are middle to end of January. And then our levy for the county is due to Department of Management and this is the highest that we can do, is due by, I believe, March 4th or 5th. And the final budget is by April 30th. So even, Matt and I know I responded to Matt's email and discussed that with him and everything. That was after May 1st. So unfortunately, it was already after budget for this next year. So we would have to do an amendment if something would have been approved between your board and the Board of Supervisors. But yeah, I would say just even approaching it and having these workshops with the supervisors ahead of budget workshops, in my opinion, would be fine. So we can start trying to crunch numbers and discuss that ahead of time on salaries too. So,
And with that, I mean, I would say that, you know, I won't speak for anybody else, but I mean, you were always, my phone number's out there, email. I mean, if you ever want to have coffee and talk about it, or, you know, I'm more than happy to, you know, if we need to have a discussion and, you know, the workshop is the best place to do it, but if you know, if we're coming up to that and you want to know feedback or something maybe before you get in there, I'm happy to field a phone call or have a meeting with you, you know, whatever makes sense for you, so.
Thank you. Appreciate the willingness to collaborate there. With our proposal of trying to fund the initial year, given the expediency and what we're trying to accomplish here, is that something that you feel would still be on the table in the days and weeks and months ahead here? Or do you think we really need to just wait until budget season of next year before we can make any movement?
I think where we're at right now, kind of what Crystal was getting at is we've already set the budgets. We've done that. Even if we fund it, you know, the way that's proposed, we would still have to make an amendment in there. So really we want to be prepared then for the next budget cycle. I know that's probably not what you want to hear me say.
Sure. No, I get it. I'm asking the obvious question just so I make
Yep.
sure.
No, and so, yeah, so really that's to me, and I won't speak for anybody else because we don't have a motion to vote on anything with that, but for me, that's where I would be at is this would need to be let's have the conversation then and in our next workshop.
Ask a quick question. The OMV park is funded by grants. How do you reapply every year for them grants, or are they for a certain time? What happens when they run out?
You're right. They're for a certain time period. And that's, as you had mentioned, Tasha actually goes out. She sits on a national board for the OHV park and the off highway. I'm trying to think of the exact name of the board, but essentially she's a board member for that. They bring her out to speak at their conference every year. She is a high-ranking individual in that committee where a lot of those grant dollars actually come from. And so she's actually advocating and promoting off-highway use of vehicles. And so I don't know if I'd have to get you the exact contract. I apologize. I don't know that off the top of my head, if it's just annual or if it's every 2 years. I don't know if either of you perhaps. I think it's every year.
So does she write for the grants then every year?
Yeah, so every year we reapply, and that's where the second FTE just became available in the last year here, that through that grant proposal, they approved the second FTE for that.
So what would happen if the grants went away?
Yeah. Hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, when we're asking, crystal ball questions, you're absolutely right. If those dollars go away, if state funding goes away, as Austin was alluding to, unfortunately, we don't know what things look like. There's obviously a lot of exciting conversation around property taxes right now and what that does to our funding as a county. And so trust me, I get it. But for the here and now, that's why we're trying to get as competitive as we can while we still have the time to be competitive, if that's fair. Any additional questions from the board or others?
I say I don't have a question. I'll maybe make a statement here out of this. And I've said it before, not to you guys, obviously, but so I live out north of Duncombe, and I would be the first to tell you, so don't take this part the wrong way because there's the rest of the story to go with it. I was not a huge trails fan. I always thought they were ridiculous. I grew up on a gravel road where you just hop on a gravel road with your bicycle and you ride to your grandparents' house. That's what I did. Couple of years ago, I had gotten on the board. I hired an employee, and I asked them. It was a specialized position, and I asked them why they came here. And the first thing they told me is they said, "Well, you guys have a great outdoor trail system. We love to bike and do these things. You guys have trails. You have all these other amenities, and they that was one of the things that really stood out with me. So as much as, and I was never like, oh, I think they're a waste. It was never something that was my cup of tea, I guess. And so, I struggled at times to see value in it personally at that point in time, several years ago. But then as I started bringing people in, as I've hired into a specialized position, that was one of the things that got brought up is you guys have amenities like that you can't find elsewhere. And I say that more of not so much to highlight the fact that maybe I had a skewed opinion before, but to highlight, that those systems, while, there's also unrealized benefit to add to kind of your discussion on revenue, that's brought in people that have specialized skills that come in here, they live here, they buy houses, they buy groceries, they buy so it's been a tremendous asset, I think, and I've changed my opinion on that. I hope that's kind of obvious, but that was where I started. So it was, like I said, this was before I got on the board. I never quite understood what the draw was. And as I've, like I said, hired into some of these roles, that I've seen that be the reason why people come here. So there's a lot of great things that your board has done, that Matt has done. And while and I've talked about some of this with other employees, we may not say it all the time or verbalize it or send out an email, a great job. I hope everybody knows we do think that they are doing that, and we have people in these positions because they are doing good work. So
Greatly appreciate that. And we obviously feel the same way. The quality of life improvements that we've made to the community via trails and other amenities has direct impact on our employers and their ability to recruit to the community. And that's, we're talking about right now, we're talking about department recruitment and retention, but you're absolutely right. That spills out into the community, and really appreciate you making that added point there. So.
Kennedy Park is so well maintained. Such a beautiful place, and we hear this every year when they come, especially how much people out of town, and that's thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars health and money.
Yep. No, I think we're all on the same page here too, as far as we all want what's best for our county. And I mean, when you look at county conservation, you mentioned the trails, that obviously has its benefit for our cyclists in the community or our runners and all that. But also I think, Jamie, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we've actually partnered with you on the roadside a little bit with some of those trail funds that we've been able to secure via grant dollars that are helping to contribute to the paving of the road that's right next to the Fort Dodge Soccer Association field right now, that's going to help divert traffic from the roundabout and all that. So I mean, like, we're always trying to partner and help improve the community as a whole. I think we're all on the same page with that. So I appreciate your willingness to hear us out here. And yeah, we'll do our best. I would say take this spreadsheet as a working document for next budget cycle. Hopefully we're consider this just being really proactive, and we're 6 months ahead of schedule on the next budget workshop. Because that's what we'll be looking at here again. We'll keep banging the drum, and appreciate your continued consideration. Anything else that I missed?
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Friends of Webster County Conservation that we have here, folks. I've been on that board ever since it started. We have quite a group that's there. As you know, when we did the Nature Center, our little group was chartered with raising $500,000 as a in kind. We were well over $600,000 we brought in from the community and people.
Hey, I've got an otter in that place named after me. So there we go.
Volunteer group that goes out and does a lot of the cleaning of the programs we have. Fund a lot of the stuff that doesn't go into the budget because the money isn't there to fund it. And that's why we were started, is to help out with that area. So it's a great, if you haven't joined us, join us. It's only $25, but it's a great group. We've done a lot for the community, and a lot of people are involved in this. Like I had to mention that, it's a good thriving organization.
thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.
Anything else before we get done? Or?
Appreciate your continued consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see. My kids have loved it out there. My wife's trying to plan some more. We homeschool, so she wants to plan a few more homeschooling days in there. So
Great PR for our community too.
I can't understand how that hasn't flooded yet. You guys have done great work out there. I grew up here. I remember driving over Ponderosa being completely underwater. I was like, what are you guys doing? You knew what you were doing.
Yep. Got to highlight that river, being a river community. Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
So if there's nothing else, I'd take a motion to adjourn then unless there's other comments that be had.
We'll move.
Second, anything before we wrap up? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned.